Forget about those ABC, we are Generation Z. Spread the love and chapter 2, we are Generation Z. Wireless, now with the reality, we got technology, we got the track. Did you grab a watch it too? Cause it doesn't have a clue that we're the kids.
That was Color Killer with the title track to their new album Generation Z. I'm Dakota Antelman, and this is our brand new podcast, 3 Pounds of Pure Culture for HUD-TV. I love music, and on this podcast, I'll take you in-depth into local and hyper-local music that gets its life in the smallest venues, from here in Hudson, Massachusetts, all the way to Boston. In that vein, we have 2 bands on the docket today. First up, it's Boston punk warriors State of the Union and their recent show in the Midway Cafe in Jamaica Plain. After that, stay tuned for a look at Color Killer, a pop-punk quartet that just made history as the youngest act to ever play the esteemed Vans Warped Tour at the Mansfield Stop. Joining me in discussing all of this today is guest host Clement Doucette. Clem, welcome to the broadcast.
Thanks for having me.
So starting off today, we're going to look at State of the Union. You guys have been around for decades. They formed back in 1981 under the stage name Police State. After a few changes in its lineup throughout the 1980s, the band toured heavily throughout New England. They dropped a few albums before breaking up, but reunited in 2012 for the comeback They're Still Riding. Clem, you and I saw State of the Union at the Midway Cafe on July 29th, where the band was discussing their upcoming second post-reunion album. We have a sneak preview of one of the songs off that album, and we'll be the first outlet to play it, so stay tuned to hear that later in the show. But getting right to it, though, Clem, you, of course, were there for these guys. You saw them live. What were your impressions of State of the Union?
Well, before we saw them, I knew that they were an older punk band who were part of that Boston scene in the early 80s. They played at a lot of the clubs back then, like the Rat, which was one of the big clubs, the Channel, some of the big punk clubs. So I was excited because I knew they were from that scene of the early 80s, which Boston was, of course, a big scene at that time. So when I heard them, I liked them because I felt they had more energy. They were harder sounding than the previous 2 bands, which, not to go into them too much, but I just preferred the sound of State of the Union because it had that sort of older, more hardcore kind of sound, which I do like. And it kind of shows how they did stand out in their era and their genre. They're from that hardcore time compared with these other bands we might have we saw who weren't from that time exactly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we were, that show we saw, for context, there were about 4 bands, I believe, that we saw, kind of from different eras, but the first 3 really, State of the Union and the 2 people who opened for them, can't necessarily remember those names right now off the top of my head, but State of the Union definitely had a very different sound from those 2. It was more, the first 2 bands were a lot more kind of classic rock.
Yeah.
They were definitely loud, they were definitely fast, but State of the Union just had an edge, and it kind of showed. Boston has a very diverse music scene. Going back in history, you got a band like Galaxy. Some of these other bands that we know that have come out of Boston, even in that era. It's a very diverse music scene, and this is a band, State of the Union, that was definitely illustrating a very distinct extreme to that music scene, and we got to see that, albeit after that 80s punk era had passed. But it was definitely a great experience to see it. As I'm sitting there in that chair when we were watching these guys, it really was energetic, and you could feel kind of the electricity coming out of these guys. Their songs had just these fantastic drum rhythms behind them, and I was really sort of captivated by the showmanship and the intensity, on top of kind of the technical prowess that we were hearing from the drums in particular. I'm a drummer, so I'm a little bit biased, but I just thought there was just a fantastic groove running underneath every song they had there. It was technically sound again, as I said, but then the drummer in that band had a lot of just kind of that it factor. Sometimes it's hard to pin exactly what it is, but there was just I was so captivated by that. I just loved it. There was personality to the percussion in those songs, but they weren't flat. a lot of times you hear, kind of a simplistic drum pattern and it's flat. It doesn't have much life. It doesn't have personality. But this, kind of just played to the song, but also had a lot of kind of life underneath it. And I was absolutely loving that.
Yeah, I agree.
So we hit on their success a little bit there. But do you have any criticisms of these guys?
Looking back on it, I really don't have any criticisms. I liked the energy that they brought to the venue. It was, of course, a small venue. There were maybe 30 people there, and it really brought out energy in the crowd. It was a small crowd. They engaged everybody well, and I feel like the energy they brought was good and sort of picked up the pace in the venue.
Definitely. These guys came out firing on all cylinders. Everyone on that stage was drenched in sweat by the end of that first song. They were into it. Their front man made a joke about how it was a little hot on that stage, but I don't think heat was the only reason these guys were, they were connecting with that music. They were showing their energy on their faces. Just the body language on that stage. It was a force that kind of came over, this as you said, very small venue. From my perspective, again, I loved them. They were a fantastic band to see there. Really took the energy up. My only criticism for them was they're a little hard to find online. They have their one album on Bandcamp. They have a few videos of some other performances on the internet, but as far as I could find, they're low quality videos. It's hard to find them on Spotify. So kind of looking at that, there's so many tools out there for bands to get their content out to their fans, their listeners. I remember going home after the show and wanting to listen to more of these guys, and had a little bit of trouble finding them. They do have that second album coming out, so hopefully it'll get easier after that second album to hear them. But they're a little hard to find. Although, if that's your biggest problem, I think you're in pretty good shape. From a music standpoint, from a performance standpoint, they were just absolutely fantastic. Transitioning sort of to our last topic, kind of looking at these guys. I said it's hard to find them a little bit online, but they do have a body of work out there. If one of our listeners was going to check out State of the Union, what would you recommend they listen to?
I would definitely recommend Bombs in Boston, which was kind of their standout song to me. It's not on Bandcamp, but it is on YouTube. I think it's the first result that comes up when you Google Bombs in Boston. But what I liked about the song was it's just a hard, kind of faster song. I like the songwriting, especially context of the bombs in Boston, how he names other places that have bombs. But I really I appreciated this song because it really brought out a certain energy in the venue and the way the band played it in particular. As Dakota mentioned, how he was drenched in sweat. You could really tell that they were into this one song, and it brought sort of the mood up in the venue, even though it's kind of a dark song. But it was really filled with energy, and I appreciated that song, and I did go and listen to it again when I got home from the show. Yeah, definitely. I was laughing at the way you were describing that, not at the subject matter, because you're right. It is a dark topic, but it's it's definitely got sort of that kind of anthemic feel. They're singing proud, they're singing loudly. And that's what a song like that can do. Punk as a genre is diverse, and a song like that demonstrates that it doesn't have to be all angsty teens or frustrated people. You can have a really powerful, prideful song in the punk genre, and I think they demonstrated that. If someone was interested in listening to this band, I think that's a great place to start. Going off of what's on Bandcamp for me, though, I listened through that whole album. I was loving Sky Without Blue. Plays a little bit towards the end of the album, I believe. And it's just a great, solid song where you get to hear that strong, restrained but rock-solid drumming that I was talking about earlier. It's got a good blend of vocals, shows sort of the vocal range in this band. We haven't talked about that as much in this discussion, but they have a good enough vocal range that I like. Not everything sounds the same. And then the guitars,
They got a solid guitar riff that runs just pretty solidly through that song. And then not to mention, again, we talked about the lyrics to Bombs in Boston. The lyrics in Sky Without Blue are just really pretty solid. So I'd recommend that. As we move out of this discussion, though, we're going to throw now to a brief audio clip. As we teased at the beginning of this segment, we're going to be debuting this song here. State of the Union has played it at gigs, and there are a few copies of it online. But we, as I'm told by State of the Union themselves, are going to be the first outlet to play the full studio recorded version of this song for you. We talked about it already. It's going to be Bombs in Boston. Let's take a look. Pivoting now to our second band, we head over to Marlborough, Massachusetts, just a town over from here in Hudson, where Color Killer has been tearing it up on a year-long rocket trip through the punk world. Their oldest members are just 12 years old. Their frontman is 8. But they're already rocking bars and clubs across the state. They're recording albums, racking up millions of views on social media, and they even recently took the stage at Warped Tour in Mansfield, Massachusetts. I've seen them twice now, once at a record release party at O'Hearn's Pub in Marlborough, and again right after State of the Union at the Midway Cafe on July 29th once again. Clem, of course, was also there for that July 29th show. They're an amazing band, and I'm excited to dig into them, so let's get started. Clem, you're still with us.
Yeah.
When you look at Color Killer, what's jumping out at you first?
Well, the first thing, obviously, that jumps out to me is that they're kids, of course, which is shocking when you hear the music they're playing, because it was harder, faster than some of the other bands and definitely some punk bands out there. They're extremely talented, which was also surprising because they're 8 and 12 and they can play guitar very professionally. The drummer, of course, which you'll probably talk about. But the other thing that really stood out to me was when they performed Holiday in Cambodia, probably one of my favorite songs, of course, by the Dead Kennedys. Just thought it was really funny but also jarring to see these kids singing Holiday in Cambodia, which of course is this violent fast song.
Yep.
Very aggressive when they chant Pol Pot. That was a good moment for me. I just appreciated so much to see children singing the Dead Kennedys, because of course that's one of my favorite bands, and it's just great to hear that song performed by children, and bringing this energy to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Ditto to pretty much everything you said there. As I mentioned, I've been following these guys for a little bit. Heard about them probably about 6 months ago, when their frontman, his name's Lincoln, he made some local headlines when he got up on stage at a Green Day concert and sang with Green Day at a concert at TD Garden. So I kind of heard about them initially through that. In addition to HUD-TV, I also work for the Community Advocate, so I was also talking to them and some work on that. And in a quote that we ended up publishing in that paper, the bassist for that band told us, this fantastic quote that I think summarizes what we're talking about with them so perfectly. He said, "Punk's not dead; it's just very young." And I think that's really the vibe you get from these guys. They're energetic. They're playing technically sound punk, but really the energy, just the essence of punk, is encapsulated by these elementary and middle school students. You talked about Holiday in Cambodia there, and how you liked kind of the aggressive, almost kind of out of place lyrics coming out of the mouths of such young kids. On the other side of that coin, though, and I know this is something that they've talked about in their media appearances, I love how they're able to kind of translate kind of these childhood ideals into the punk genre. If you look at their original songs, obviously the Dead Kennedy song is a cover, but if you look at their original songs, they're not singing about they're not singing about love. They're not singing about violence or politics or any of that really. They have a song, about how they're afraid of spiders. They have a song, about how you shouldn't talk to strangers. They have a song, the chorus, I think we're going to talk about this later, but the chorus of the song is about how they hate winter. And the chorus is literally, "I'm going to burn your snowman to the ground." And so they're taking these childhood feelings, that appear kind of small and childlike to adults, but they're putting it in this adult, mature genre of punk, and making it, this just very unique blend that you don't hear much, from even kind of teen bands that are popular. Blink-182 kind of pushed the genre a little bit in terms of the topics they would talk about, but these guys are basically taking that style of songwriting and making it even more childlike because it's kids singing it. So I just love that. I love that they're able to kind of display the versatility of the punk genre. But moving on a little bit, as I mentioned, these guys have a ton of views online. They're playing packed clubs. They just played Warped Tour to what they described when we talked to them at their Jamaica Plain gig, to what they described as a crowd that pushed about 1,000 attendees. They even have a camera crew following them right now to make a feature-length documentary on their journey. When people see Color Killer, they just pretty much instantly fall in love. From your perspective as someone who's seen them, what do you think's behind that?
I think there's something cathartic about just seeing these kids playing technically sound punk music. It's just very inspiring. And of course, there's a phenomenon kind of where everybody wants to achieve fame, or most people want to achieve fame or become a rock star. And there's something about seeing children playing these songs that are technically sound and energetic that, well, if they can do it, well, it's inspiring because maybe if I practice, I can also play this kind of music as well. There's just something about seeing children continuing the punk music. It's just awesome to see children playing music and continuing to put music out there in future generations as well, and not just so that it's not stagnant or it's changing and evolving.
Yeah, it's hopeful to see them. Often that's not a word that's not often a word that we associate with punk. Oftentimes you don't necessarily leave a punk show even feeling hopeful. But I think that's just kind of the overwhelming feeling you get from these kids. It's optimistic, it's happy, but it's raw, you know, and it is great. As you know, regardless of your age, you're watching an 8-year-old on stage. You know, their frontman Lincoln goes into a guitar solo at one point, and you're sitting there like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm watching this, and it's just fantastic to see. You know, and again, I've talked about the songwriting because I think that's, you know, as crazy as it is to say about a elementary middle school band, it's amazing to see the songwriting they have, because, you know, kind of punk is all about speaking your mind, and we're in a generation now that is kind of wrought by this conflict between speaking your mind and keeping quiet. Millennials or Generation Z, as Color Killer identifies itself, are generations that generally like to scream and yell when they have a problem with something. And I think that's what Color Killer embodies. Even though their songs are about bedtimes and spiders, even though they're only 8 years old, these kids give you a sense of hope when they're able to kind of smash their drums, beat up their guitars, you know, and have hundreds of people listen to them. You know, it's just kind of hopeful to think that, you know, the answer is to speak your mind. The answer is to speak out, you know, and be loud when you have something to say. You know, and again, I think that's really kind of what punk's all about. Absolutely. With that, I'd like to ask you now kind of the same question we used to sort of wrap up our discussion on State of the Union. If people want to listen to Color Killer, and I definitely recommend you do, what would you recommend they listen to?
I would have to be Down with Winter, because it just kind of encapsulates everything that I love about Color Killer. The lyrics sort of capture this childlike sort of like angst or wonder that we might have felt when we were children, like how we hate a certain season. Like that's just amazing. But it sort of encapsulates their energy, and it shows off sort of their technical skill as well, which I know Dakota can talk about more.
Absolutely. You know, I love Down with Winter, and I've loved it for a while. That was one of the first songs I heard, you know, when I saw them online. You know, as I said, I've been following these guys for a little while, and that was really one of the first songs I heard. That was my introduction to these guys, and it's still one of my favorites. It's just got this fantastic guitar riff behind it. The drums to it are solid. The lyrics are to die for, as I said. You know, the chorus threatens, "I'm going to burn your snowman to the ground." And in that we see just the beautiful dichotomy that is Color Killer. They're punk, they're mean, and they can even have violent imagery, but in the end, they're still kids. You know, they're going to burn something to the ground, but it's going to be a snowman. And I just love that. I think that is so indicative of what this band has, what they have to offer, and I think why they're so just captivating to anyone who hears them.
I think it gave us a plan for this winter. When I get back from college, I'm going to burn your snowman to the ground, Dakota.
Watch out. So that's it for our segment on Color Killer. We're going to head out now with the very song Clem and I love so much, and our plan for the winter, evidently. It's going to be Down with Winter. Take a listen.
It's cold as hell outside, the snow, it makes me sick. I hate the winter, I don't wanna do with it. I'm gonna stay inside, away from all the cold. We'll keep the snowballs, yeah, this winter's getting old. Gonna burn your snowman to the ground and watch it burn, 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 burn. I hate the winter and I wish it'd go away. go away. Down with winter, go away. Down with winter, go away. Down with winter, go away.
And a big shout out, obviously, to both of our bands featured in this episode. Also, a big thanks to Clement Doucette for stopping by.
Of course.
You can listen to State of the Union's first album, True, on their Bandcamp page, and can see Color Killer through their Spotify page. Also, catch either of those bands as well live through their upcoming Facebook pages, where they'll have all of their gigs posted. Also, stay tuned in the coming months for State of the Union's upcoming second studio album after the reunion, as well as Color Killer's feature documentary currently being produced by Ironbound Films. You can find out more information on all of that just with a simple Google search. All of that is pretty well documented on the internet. That's going to be it for this episode, though. Until next time, I'm Dakota Antelman. This is HUD-TV. Thanks for listening.